Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining today's webinar. I'm Laura Milojevic, the Director of Marketing and Business Development at Simplify Solutions. Today, we're excited to have our partner of Planning, Analytics, and Consolidations, Jared Bialik, discussing and demoing how to source data from S/4HANA and SAP Analytics Cloud. After the webinar concludes, a short survey is going to appear. If you guys can please fill that out, we'd really appreciate it. The feedback, always helps make us better. So also, feel free to reach out to Jared or myself after the webinar with any questions. And now I'll hand it over to Jared so he can get started.
Hi, thank you for joining. My name is Jared Bialik. I'm a client partner with Simplify Solutions. This webinar is meant to cover, some of the issues I've seen some clients have when trying to find and connect to S/4HANA and bring data from S/4HANA. This isn't as much about creating the connections in the SAC Cloud Connector. This is more about kind of identifying the CDS views, being able to see those if they're not available, how we activate the services, and how to just really go about researching what view it is right for you. That's one of the kind of biggest challenges I'm seeing clients and even other consultants have, from people in our firm, people in other firms, as we kind of discuss, talk shop. So I thought this webinar is timely, and many of you will find helpful if you're connecting to S/4HANA, in different views within S/4HANA. So this is going to kind of go about how you decide which view to use, and then kind of how you activate and connect that view. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of our company, Simplify Solutions, a little bit about myself, and then we'll jump into it. But I'm going to turn off the camera now that you've all seen my face, and we'll just get into the presentation. Okay. So just a little bit of background about me. As I said, Jared Bialik, client partner with Simplify Solutions. I've been in the SAP space since 2005. Started in SAP BW and BW Integrated Planning. Moved on to BPC when it was acquired from OutlookSoft 2008. Did primarily BPC work for about 10, 11 years. And then moved over to start work with SAP Analytics Cloud and group reporting. So I have a lot of implementation experience, again, across all of SAP's planning solutions, across many different industries. I've been doing this a while. So feel free to kind of ask me any questions or email me after the presentation. Again, I've seen a lot of different scenarios, planning scenarios, and your questions aren't answered during this presentation. I'm happy to help you. So Simplify Solutions, we are an SAP Analytics firm that specializes in planning and analytics. We have been around for a while. Again, previously, primarily BPC consultants that moved very early into the SAC space. Again, producing some of the first large SAC referenceable projects. We have been fully invested in the SAP Analytics Cloud solution, both for planning and analytics, also connecting it to S/4HANA, Data Warehouse Cloud. So that is really all that we focus on, is planning and consolidated reporting. So now with the breakout of group reporting from BPC into SAC and group reporting, that's our focus going forward, is SAC and group reporting, as well as Data Warehouse Cloud. All we do is SAP. We don't do Hyperion or anything else. So we are fully focused on, this solution, and we're experts on the solution because it is our only focus. So some of our product specialties include, as I mentioned, Analytics Cloud Group Reporting, BW, BPC, Business Objects. We offer customers, implementation services. We'll do training. We do ongoing maintenance. We come in and we can fix kind of other implementers work as well. So really the full gamut as far as systems implementers go. We have, recently and in the past, we won the SAC Planning Hackathon. I believe we finished in second place this year, first runner-up. We've won it in the past, so just kind of further credentializing ourselves amongst many of our referenceable projects, but even these competitions we're doing very well as well. So here's just kind of a quick overview of some of our example customer references. Some quotes there. Again, we've done end-to-end planning solutions for some of these large customers, oftentimes starting with kind of small implementations and expanding the scope. But if there's anyone that you're looking for in your industry, we'd be happy to set you up with customer references. One thing that we really focus on at Simplify is our prepackaged solutions. We kind of been working in parallel with SAP as they expand their prepackaged and rapid deployment solutions. We were some of the first to offer a broad set of prepackaged solutions, in terms of sales planning, revenue planning, financial statement planning, HR planning, capital planning, and some of kind of the more niche planning as well, such as intercompany trading partner, expense planning, travel planning, what have you. So we've developed these prepackaged solutions to be kind of jump starts to getting implementations done in a shorter amount of time, with kind of proven architecture and modeling that has been successful at previous engagements. So some of our sample approach of our projects is basically being able to use this prepackaged content as a starting point. Take into consideration your specific industry needs, then specific client needs. You will generally lead to a successful project. So being able to, what we see a lot of is that a lot of the planning processes and delivery is pretty standard across industries and across clients within different industries. So if you're doing cost center planning, if you're doing revenue planning, we found that our prepackaged content really is an accelerator and covers a lot of that 80-20 rule, in that we can deliver our content and then just make minor tweaks. So as we approach each project, we look at kind of the different planning areas. Our phase one recommendations could be depending on the scope and our requirements meetings, could be anywhere from a low to medium to high configuration. Low configuration would be basically just kind of taking our content out of the box as is, and being able to work with that with minor customizations. Then you kind of move up the scale from medium to high configuration, where high configuration is pretty much a completely custom solution. So we've had a lot of success with this, being able to leverage, again, a lot of implementations that we've done on SAC, kind of use that modeling, use our models, use our dimensionality as a starting point, and also our visualizations and standard reports as well. One thing that, if you're not familiar with SAC, all the work that we've done with data actions, which are kind of calculations and programs that we code in, that's where we also see a lot of the time savings, because we've done a lot of that legwork already to build those data actions and advanced formula scripts to rapidly accelerate these solutions. Okay, so now getting to why we're here on this webinar, connecting the SAP S/4HANA data. Many of you may have seen this connections overview diagram. So as we can see, SAP Analytics Cloud is a platform that is able to connect to many sources of data, S/4HANA Cloud and S/4HANA on-premise being two of those. They are different. So how you connect to on-premise sources is different than how you connect to cloud sources, and what you also need, some of the intermediate connectors that you would need for on-premise are also different than what you would need for connecting to other cloud solutions. So this is an overview diagram. This is available on help.sap.com. If you just kind of navigate to the data connections, it's one of the main links that you see there. You'll see this. Again, it provides kind of a great overview of where different sources and kind of what firewalls and what connectors you need to connect to those. So one thing that we want to establish, kind of the difference of right off the bat, is when you're establishing these connections, there's really two main type of SAC connections. There are live connections and there are import connections. So live connections connect to, as the name implies, create a live connection to the data source, be it an SAP system that doesn't require the replication of data. So one advantage of this is that they're very easy to set up. So really all you're seeing is if you have the authorizations to connect to a live connection data source, it's going to be available to you. You don't need to do a lot of the mapping, a lot of the search for the right CDS view and transformation. It's available to you, just out of the box. One reason that we, some drawbacks to live connections versus import connections is that, you require import connections in order to be able to work, to incorporate it with planning data. So if we move on to our import connections, this is replicating the data from a source into your SAC model. So live connection, you're not replicating the data. It's basically a live query and report into the source system. When we use an import connection, we are replicating that data. But what that gives us is it allows us to import into a planning model, where then we can make top-end adjustments if it's planning data, or we can add specific KPIs that might not be in that source data. We can use that actuals data to seed a forecast or a plan. So importing that data gives us a lot of flexibility if we want to make adjustments to it, if we want to use it as a basis for planning and forecasting. So that's why a lot of times we recommend using an import connection, because a lot of this data is to then be used in planning and forecasting. And that just kind of skips that step right there, having to create another model and then having this kind of live connection versus, import connection. If you know that you're going to be using plan data, forecast data with your actuals, then we recommend an import connection. So one thing that I see most of all is that people, kind of prior to when we get there, and kind of what I see, other consultants do is they set up the connection and then they go look for the data. So when you kind of look at queries and look at kind of what's available, you will, you're only going to see a limited set. So when people are looking for financial, financial extractions, there's a lot of things to consider. Do we need that in periodic? Do we need it year to date? Do we need quantities? Do we need dollars? Do we need, already converted, in terms of currency? Do we need kind of group currency data? Do we need local currency data? Do we need transaction data? So depending on all those answers to those questions is going to determine what CDS view is best for you to use. What I have found most helpful as the rapid deployment solutions and business content continue to grow in SAP is using that as a starting point. So, looking at the business content, if you're not familiar with business content, it's, I can go into the system and kind of show you at the end of this, how you can access that, but it's very straightforward. It's just a menu off your main SAC, landing page. A ton of different SAP content is available to you. There's also rapid deployment solutions, which are kind of business content along with a lot of added documentation. And that's some of what we're going to explore today is these rapid deployment solutions and how you can use that documentation and what's already delivered to kind of see what is, where you should connect to and what views you should import in your S/4HANA system. And again, it does depend if you're, cloud or on-prem, kind of how those services are activated. And then kind of once you do a lot of that investigation, you can determine if a scope item needs to be activated. And if you're not familiar with best practices, when you're setting up an S/4HANA system, group reporting, SAC, there are best practices scope items that often need to be activated in order for certain communication structures to be available to you, in order which then allow certain CDS views to be available to you. So that's why I put these steps in here, because most people don't explore the business content or the rapid deployment solutions first. And really that's going to help guide you in what different views are applicable to you. There are lists of CDS views, and I'll explore those as well to show you what that looks like and how you can navigate that website. But I'm also going to show you kind of where that list has limitations, and even where certain blogs, they're very popular blogs in terms of creating the transaction data and master data integration between SAP for HANA. There are some popular blogs that have some or make some assumptions that don't always hold, that might kind of lead you down a wrong path. So I'm kind of teaching you from experience that some of those assumptions, if you rely on them, you're going to miss some very applicable CDS views. So the starting point that I have here is this best practices rapid deployment solution starting point. So I'm just going to open up, and I already have it open here. But this is a great blog by Mark Burke, who I worked with recently. This is an example of the rapid deployment solution documentation. There is a ton of stuff here in terms of what a lot of people initially get started planning SAC. So financial planning, your basic GL accounts, quantities by customer, product. This is all available, as part of a rapid deployment solution. Again, is a good starting point that just became available this August. So a lot of people aren't even aware that this rapid FP&A solution is available. But if you kind of review this video on YouTube later, this URL is in, as I'm covering it now, but it's also in the presentation. But really what you're going to see is a lot of links to good documentation and best practices content that, again, kind of guides you into what it is you're looking for in terms of solving kind of business questions. So this primarily covers, again, all your GL account balances, and as well as sales data for customer by product, in different dollars and in different quantities. So that really is a great starting point for a lot of companies that are getting started with SAC. That's some of the first things that they want to cover. But there's also business content on things like workforce planning, CapEx planning, cost center planning, a lot of different planning modules that have been made available. And then within the documentation, and I'm going to kind of go through this documentation a little bit so you know what to look for, because again, as someone who's been through this a couple of times, when other people are going through it, I can see where they get stuck because it's not doesn't always tie together in the easiest way. So that's a lot of what we're going to cover here. So again, when you are looking for this rapid deployment solutions, you're going to go to the business content within SAC, and you can just scroll, and these are pretty close to the top because they're recently introduced, but you can also search for them as well. So in the, if you were to open up the rapid deployment solution and go through some of that documentation, this is an example of what you'll find. And I'll just kind of show you real quick, in those links, here you have kind of this rapid sales planning analysis 4DP. These are best practices solutions. If you were to go, and if you're not familiar with best practices, again, this is one of the key things where if you don't look here first, you're going to go directly into the S/4HANA connection. You're going to look for CDS views, and they're not all going to be available to you. So you might need scope items activated, which these best practices will tell you. When you look in the documentation, and what you're looking for here are configuration guides and test script guides. So if you look here, I've already opened these two things up to give you an idea of kind of what they look like. But this is this is kind of the more detailed view. But if you look here, this is the implementation guide, this is the test script, but this goes through pretty much everything that's in this rapid deployment solution. So it's going to give you an overview of the solution. It's going to give you, everything, different configuration settings that you set in your model, what dimensions are included, when you're extracting, kind of what settings to make there, what what to connect to. However, it doesn't have everything. So this is why you kind of need to use this document in tandem with this document, which has a little bit more detail. And this is the configuration guide, and this really gets into step by step how you set this up. And I've taken some screenshots here. This is, again, delivered SAP content that you might not see if you're just going to help.sap.com. Right now, they have added kind of the best content, or the best practices and rapid deployment solution content to help.sap.com, but a couple months ago it wasn't there. So you had to go, and this is still a good path, is to go to the best practices, download these documents, go through them, and it's going to take you step by step as to what you need to activate and what connections you're looking for. So as I'm looking here, I can see that these are all the views that I'm using to connect to my master data. And this is really what we're looking for, because you will see a lot of the master data views available to you, even without activating some specific SAP services. But kind of with basic best practices activation, you might see a lot of these master data views available to you. However, this is a great example, this A_journal entry item basic. This CDS view has a ton of helpful, transactional data. Again, by GL account, by period, by customer, by product, has both dollars, and quantity. This is a great starting point for, financial actuals, as well as kind of integrating this and creating planning models. So that's why I want to cover it. And a lot of the steps that I'm going through and how to activate this service and kind of how to search for it, and why if you don't go through these steps, this view might not be available to you. That is kind of, I'm using this view as an example that you can also apply to other views. But this is really the documentation that you want to get to. That, again, if you're just looking at help.sap or SAC, SAP Analytics Cloud or SAP Analytics.cloud, it might not be super intuitive to get to this type of documentation, but this is really what you want to get to. So within this documentation is this view, which is a great architecture view. It's something that I've adopted for our custom solutions. Basically, just being able to show how the data, comes from the source, gets loaded into a model, and then you have, data actions and stories on top of that model. So it really, by providing the technical names, you can look at this and exactly what to search for when you're going into SAP Analytics Cloud. So here we don't have the views for master data, and we have just basically the API. You're going to see here it says via SAP COM 0087. So that's a communication structure 887. I'm going to show you that. I'm going to show you some screenshots, and we can look in the system as well. But you're going to see the same thing. These are screenshots from our system that show kind of how this communication structure is enabled, how it's used to then basically enable the underlying CDS view that has this transaction data. So again, looking at this is kind of what you want to get to in terms of knowing what you want to look for. And again, that's really the what we're achieving is we want to know what CDS view we need, and then how do we activate that view. And then once you get that done, it's pretty easy from there. Once that view is available to you, then you can go in and you can look at many online tutorials, and even we have tutorials on how to do the transformation, load it into a model. But what we're covering here is really how, using this documentation, how you can determine what view it is that you want. So you can see that looking at this documentation, we want this journal entry item basic API, but this is different than what we see here, where it says specifically A_journal entry item basic. Now, if you were to look at journal entry item basic, if you didn't activate the service, this wouldn't even show up. You might see I_journal entry item basic, and I'm going to kind of go into the differences between those two different views and how they're different. They have different components, they have different capabilities, and they're kind of, A is the recent version, is the kind of improved new release of I. But if you look at certain documentation that's out there, that wouldn't be apparent to you. And that's part of what this webinar is meant to convey, is being able to look at some of the documentation, kind of knowing what to take from it, but then also realizing that there are exceptions to some rules that are proposed in that documentation. So as we're looking through here, again, I'm just kind of saying, this is an example of the architecture and how we have to use these to, use all these documents and different parts of these documents to kind of arrive at what it is we're looking for. So as we, look here, we can see that this A_journal entry item basic has the transaction data view that we want to connect to S/4HANA. So, again, going through the kind of thought process, you have to look at what business questions are you trying to answer, look at the business content and the rapid deployment solutions, and determine, again, most likely there will be something there that gets you close, if doesn't answer all of it, right? And then we can tweak. So finding this business content and finding these rapid deployment solutions, what it does is it gets you to the right extractor and CDS view that has the data that you need. So that's why we look at the business content and rapid planning solutions first, to be able to get to the right source data, and then we can kind of look at different views once we have an idea of kind of what's available. So I want to point you to kind of an early blog that was, released early last year. This is a blog that I've referenced several times when integrating S/4HANA data to SAC. So we're going to open this up right now. But I'm also going to kind of show you, where some assumptions are made that might not always hold. So this is a great blog that's, referenced in many other blogs. I have the link again in the presentation. It goes through the, differences between live and import connections, goes through differences, between different types of CDS views, and kind of also links you to documentation of how to, activate those OData services and test the OData services. So again, a lot of, what I'm covering in this webinar is kind of linked to in this blog. This is a great starting point. But, some of these, even knowledge base articles, some of them are dead links, so kind of be aware of that as well. So as we're looking at CDS views, there's a couple different ways that you can look at CDS views. So One is to open up the view browser in your SAP Fiori dashboard. I'm going to cover that. I have a couple screenshots of how, what that looks like. And then you're going to look for kind of different properties, of that view. So, again, this blog is kind of saying you typically want views that start with C underscore, but we know that, our view starts with A. It also mentions kind of some of these parameters. Now, this is one thing that I really want to draw your attention to, because if you were to look at, and we're going to show this kind of screenshots of the views side by side, the two different journal entry item views, the A underscore journal entry item basic does not have this OData publish equals true, does not have the analytics query equals true in the annotation. Okay, so if you are searching for these and this is where you started, you would not pull up that view. It wouldn't kind of meet your criteria, and you'd immediately discount it even if you even saw it. So I want to show you kind of what that looks like, when we bring it up. So when we go into the view browser, you're going to see a tile that looks like this, and you can search for it, view browser, if you have access to it. This is in your S/4HANA system, right? So when you open this browser, you are going to get, you can see here, almost 59,000 views. It's a little daunting. So you need to be able to filter that down. This is an example that's, brought from that blog where it's showing the consumption. It's a consumption type. Has the analytics query equals true, has the OData publish equals true. But now I'm going to show you, when I know that this view works, right? I've used it. It's part of the rapid deployment solution. I've extracted data using this, but when you come into your system, it might not show as released. It might not show as, might not show, and I'm going to show this on the next screen. There are different screens here that show what the components of that view are. So what are your fields? What are your measures? Your kind of key figures. And then there's this annotation, which basically says, is it a composite view type? Is it consumption view type? Is it is OData publish equals true? Is the analytics query equals true? Those are typically what we've used as markers for CDS views that we could bring into SAC, specifically for import data. If it's analytics query equals true, then you can use as a live view. If it's OData publish equals true, then you can use it as an import. That's been the, through documentation, that's what's been communicated as what's available. But as we see here, this, if we're to look at I journal entry item basic versus A journal entry item basic, this is the new version of I journal entry item basic. So, the reason that, specifically in my case, is that I wanted a view that was able to bring, I was trying to bring quantities, sales quantities by customer, by product, into a view. And I have looked at a lot of different views, kind of looking, and I'll kind of show you at some of the sites that I looked at and how I looked for it under sales, and didn't quite get there. When I looked at the rapid deployment solution, I saw that everything was there that I needed. And I was saying kind of like, why am I not seeing, why didn't I come across this A underscore journal entry item basic? And it's because it's not in the documentation. It's only in the rapid deployment solution documentation. So depending on kind of where you start your search, that's why I say start with the business content and the rapid deployment solution. because if you don't start there, you might miss some very popular CDS views that you'll want to use. So as we look here, if I were, and I did this, I went into the view browser and I filtered on everything that was OData publish equals true, because I knew I wanted to replicate this data. We're going to use it as in a planning model, but we also wanted the actuals to come from S/4HANA. I filtered on OData publish equals true, and this didn't come up. It got filtered out. So now I'm looking at a bunch of views, but I'm not seeing the view that I really wanted and really needed, because based on some of the blog entries, that those assumptions don't always hold. So kind of if you take those and use them as a guide versus kind of an absolute truth, you'll be a lot more successful. Specifically with some of these very common views that are used in the rapid deployment solutions. So as we look here, again, we see OData publish equals true for the iJournal entry item basic. We don't see this parameter or this attribute on the A_journal entry item basic, right? And this is the view that has everything that we need. And I've extracted this, I've used it in planning, used it in analytics. This you are able, even though it doesn't have this OData publish equals true, you are able to extract this view and bring that data into SAP. So, kind of getting how we get there, because we have about 15 minutes left. This is what your views look like when you're opening it up. You're going to select your SAP S/4HANA. This is, again, from that documentation, kind of shows the structure of how we are, bringing S4 tables, usually AC.A or AC.U, but sometimes AC.P. It gets brought into CDS views, which are, kind of exposed using an OData service, goes through the S/4HANA connector, and you're able to bring it into your model. Then once it's in the model, you can run data actions and have reports, planning grids, charts, that are then put into stories. So this is a good view of kind of the source to target, kind of eventual user interface target, all the way to your stories. So again, this documentation, and I want to point to this because if you go to this site, this has a lot of good links. And so this is the digital library. If you go into here, you're going to see that within this document, there are a ton of links to documentation that you might find helpful. Everything from importing transaction data, to modeling, to changing data actions, adapting stories. This is a very helpful document. That I only came across a couple months ago, maybe because it didn't exist. But again, this is when you're implementing, you're kind of looking for solutions, and the answer isn't always in front of you. These are the types of documents and documentation that are most helpful, because you're able to kind of without kind of searching for a needle in a haystack, this really organizes it in a very easy to consume way, sometimes easier than like help.sap.com, right? So this is a great document if you're looking to kind of supplement the different sources, kind of your different resources for information from SAP and from other blogs out there. I would add this to your list. So going back to this, setting up an import connection, you have to activate different scope items. And so, you're going to see, what you want to find is basically these best practices guides. So setting up, connection, for example, you have to activate certain scope items, which you have to call SAP and basically tell them, I want to activate, 1YB, or, down here, I want to activate 2US. And then they're going to activate that scope item, and then these communication structures become available to you. So it's very important, because you might be looking for a CDS view, and you have to have a scope item activated before the communication structure is available to you. And then once you set up that communication structure, now the CDS view is available to you, right? So there's a definite order, and that CDS view might be available to you because it's been activated by someone else. But if it's not, you might have to go back and activate a scope item in order to be able to, again, open up that communication structure, which then opens up that CDS view. So that's why I bring that up. That's a step that a lot of people don't know, right? They're looking in their S/4HANA connections. They see a bunch of views that are already activated, and they think that's the end of it. You have to look and see, do I need a best practices scope item activated? Okay, now that that's been set up, I need to set up the communication structure. And then once I've done that, my APIs are then going to be available. So this is specifically for the S/4HANA Cloud when I'm talking about communication arrangements and structures. I, after this, cover the on-premise, but this is specifically, if you're to look at this, it says SAP S/4HANA Cloud. Again, it's going to make these communication services available to you, which then you can activate. And you'll see, some of those, as I mentioned, that 0087 is one if you're bringing it from the cloud. You are then going to, basically create communication users that are assigned to communication systems, which are, then use communication arrangements. So as we do this, once these arrangements are set up, then your CDS views are going to be available to you. This is in this documentation. It's in this document. So if you were to look at this, I might even have it up here, but this is an example. But it's going to walk you through, kind of all the services that you need to extract, the COM scenarios that you need to activate, and everything that you need to run. So the key is to understand, whether you are on-premise or cloud, okay? This is for S/4HANA on-premise. It is a different document for the cloud, right? So there are different steps. So you'll see here, how you go about activating this content is different. So when you, when you are activating in the cloud, again, you're using these communication structures, communication arrangements and systems. These will, once these are activated, these have the APIs that are attached with these specific communication structures, okay? And, if you're looking, you can see, kind of, when you search for APIs, it's going to tell you what structures you need to activate. But those structures might not be available if you have to, again, back to the scope items, if you need to activate those scope items, those structures might not appear available. So that's why you have to do it in the correct order. So this is an example of, looking at extracting data, transaction data for group reporting, for example. So I know, based on this, and let me see if I can kind of make this a little bit bigger here. But I know, looking at, the documentation, here are my APIs for group reporting. Here's the integration. I'm going to transaction data for group reporting, read, and then that's basically going to guide me to the transaction data service that I need to activate, right? So this is what I'm looking for. And this is the service that, again, using the, this documentation gets me to knowing that this is the service that I want to activate. And I'm using these two documents together. This is the help.sap documentation. This is the basically kind of activation of that service. And then once you get that set up, then you're going to see the different OData services available to you. So transaction, the reason I showed this one is because it's a little bit different. This is an OData service that requires you to write a freehand query. There's specific documentation, but I want to bring it up because a lot of CDS views, it's just a normal kind of drag and drop fields. If you're familiar with the service, it's very intuitive. This is kind of one that is not as intuitive. When we go to the documentation in SAP, I'll kind of show you what that looks like. So as far as activating a service on premise, so I showed you kind of on cloud how you have to activate the scope item, then the communication arrangements. For on-premise, you're going to go to SPRO, ING, navigate down to this activate maintain services. The documentation has you go to, I'll kind of show you, documentation has you go to SAP NetWeaver Gateway OData channel. If you're on a new version of S/4HANA, that pathway might not show up for you. I had to find it under ABAP platform, OData channel, activate, maintain services. So a different path than the documentation. So that's why I bring it up here. But then, as we're looking, this is again our journal entry item API. So once I activate this, so I'm just searching, I'm putting this in the search. I'm not putting a_ journal entry item basic. I'm putting the API for the journal entry item basic service, which then, once this is activated, now this a journal entry item basic will show up as available. So I will see, when I search, I will see I_ journal entry item basic, and I'll see a_ journal entry item basic. Okay. So one thing that, looking at the documentation, I might have to reopen this link. So if I go to this page, this is where a lot of people start. So, here I'm looking at, and this is specifically for a retrieve balances for GL accounts view, right? So this is the kind of service that I'm looking at. It's going to tell me kind of what view to look at. And then it even gives me kind of a sample freehand query that I need to write. Now, again, not all queries require this. Some do. If it does require it, you'll see it here. You'll see kind of some sample code that you need to write a freehand query. But again, not all the documentation mentions that, so that's why I bring it up here. But if we're to look at some of these other services, or even journal entry item, We can see a bunch of different CDS views that are available. You will not see A underscore journal entry item basic in here, right? You'll see I underscore journal entry item basic, but you will not see the A. Given that this is where a lot of people, when you say, okay, what do I want? Okay, I want GL account, I want customer, I want product. This is where a lot of people start their search, because it's a list of views that's kind of broken down by business interest, and a lot of people can kind of get. And again, there are a lot of views that are available here that work, but a lot of this has been updated. Some of these are deprecated, so you can still use them, but they're not the most recent view to use. So that's why I want to show you this site, because this is where a lot of people end up, because they say, I want to know what all views are available because I'm not seeing everything when I go to connect in S/4HANA. I'm not seeing these, and again, they have to activate the service, but even this isn't an exhaustive list, right? Everything is in that view browser that I showed you before. So if we look here, every view is available here. But again, it's not, you kind of want to weigh looking at the documentation I just showed you, looking at this view browser, as well as looking at the rapid deployment kits. You want to use all that documentation together to get a complete picture, because if you rely on one source, you're probably not going to get the best result that you're looking for. So we're at the top of the hour. I hope a lot of you found this helpful. I'm going to put my email here, Jared Bialik at simplifysolutions.com. Send me an email, especially if you're having problems kind of activating services, what have you. I've done it on cloud, I've done it on premise. I found a lot of views, use custom CDS views. We didn't cover that here. Again, this is kind of using standard S/4HANA views and how you can find them and how you can find kind of what's the best view for you. So thanks again. Feel free to, again, send me an email with any questions. Thank you for your time. And yeah, that's all I have. Thank you.